Get your oven mitts on, people. We're taking these hot takes out of the oven and they're piping, they're boiling, they're smoking. I asked you, yes you, for your hottest, spiciest takes about Final Fantasy XIV 7.3 and beyond. And now it's time to sit back, enjoy ourselves, and react to them. And I think it's time to do just that. Hello, everybody. I am Jmulls, and let's get into this.
Things would have been far worse.
First up, we're going to talk about the best character in Dawntrail. And to throw their hat in the ring, we have at Rickus316, who says Shale, probably the best character added in Dawntrail. And you know what? She is my second favorite. Number one being Sphene, of course. Like, naturally, right? Look, I have enough thumbnails of her that I feel that should have been obvious. But with how polarizing Dawntrail has been, I feel like Shale's been one of those bright spots for a lot of people, where I just normally see people going, yeah, she's pretty cool, I like her. I liked having her be essentially the main narrator we had for quite a bit of the content in point 2 and point 3. I think the VO does a stellar performance, and I think is a large reason why a lot of people, at least in my experience, pretty much like Shale, resoundingly so. It's just that character has a voice that really lends themselves to that narrator role, and I think it goes to show just how likable a character can be, even with not that much in terms of character development, or really character exploration. It's like, yeah, she has been a major part of the story over the last couple of patches, but I wouldn't say I know too much about the character herself. I just know that I like having her on the screen and I like having her with everyone else. I think having characters that serve that role and function like that are important. I traditionally call them like supporting characters, where by themselves not necessarily the most like engaging or enthralling characters of all time, but they make the characters surrounding them in the scene they're in more engaging and captivating just simply by being there. I think Shale's a good example of that, and I also hope that she's kind of like a litmus test. I think one of the biggest issues that I personally had with like point 0 and point 1 was the characterization, the overall writing quality. We've been over that countless times, we don't need to particularly rehash it, but I think a character like Shale, who is not necessarily in the spotlight herself all that much, being as enjoyable as she ended up being, I feel it's a good litmus test going forward, that they can write supplementary characters to be additive to the overall experience and not be just kind of there or annoying, like I felt a lot of the cast were in point 0 and point 1. A little bit less so in point 1, but I digress. I think in a lot of ways, Shale as a character is a breath of fresh air, and if we can get more characters like her going forward, or we just have her stick around for whatever reason, like you gotta imagine, if we're going to go shard hopping, Shale and her group are going to be rather important to that. Maybe we could like utilize her group and possibly her as like a home base of operations. I imagine we do need to build up a bit of a new crew at least, get some new blood in there for a long-term story to properly be engaging and, well, just flat out fun and interesting. I think a character like Shale could be slotted into that role very seamlessly, and I wouldn't mind at all. I think she squarely falls in the realm of, if I see more of this character, I would be happy. I wouldn't say I have any strong feelings one way or the other when it concerns her though, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either. You're never going to write a story with so many characters like Final Fantasy XIV has, where every character is going to be like in the stratosphere of like Emmett Selk or Grahatia. It's just not going to really happen. But having standout characters like Shale is good. So yeah, thumbs up from me. I still prefer Sphene, right? Sphene's my goat, but I'm not upset at putting Shale into my number 2 slot, at least when Dawntrail is concerned.
Things would have been far worse.
Guys, I think it's that time again when we get a little bit controversial around here. We have at Azure Roxy, who says, WoW focused on casuals and they never reached the highs of Wrath. Final Fantasy XIV focused on casuals and they lost almost half of the profit the game makes, and its player base is in freefall. Guild Wars 2 focused on casuals, and they can barely make their mini expansions now because they have no resources since they're forced to make a Guild Wars 3 after how hard they mismanaged Guild Wars 2. The casuals are also confirmed by the devs to play so badly that their DPS is far less than half of a decent, or at least a half-decent player, let alone a good one. Every MMO that tries to focus so hard on casuals has failed miserably. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy XI, doesn't hyper-focus on casuals, and many are heading back to it, to the point a server overloaded cause too many went to it. Guild Wars 1 doesn't hyper-focus on casuals, and it's still quite popular. Classic WoW has been immensely popular since it first started, but do tell everyone how it's not the hyper-focus and casuals that's to blame. Okay, I will, because every point in this hot take is kind of wrong. Now, I don't want to come off as mean when I say that, but I can't talk about Guild Wars or Final Fantasy XI because I don't have experience or that much experience with them. I will say the Final Fantasy XI servers are very small to my knowledge. However, when it concerns WoW and Final Fantasy XIV, it's just wrong. So the premise is that the game fell off after Wrath, but the problem with that is that Wrath was the start of the casualization of World of Warcraft, or at least the hyper-modern casualization of World of Warcraft. It's when looking for dungeons was added into the game. Like, you could just queue up for a dungeon. That was added in Wrath. There's a whole term called Wrath Babies, where people that were new to the game in Wrath of the Lich King were stereotyped to be so bad that they were called Wrath Babies. When really it was just somewhat that people were being exposed to more of a broader spectrum of player skill. Also, Classic WoW has been immensely popular, but to believe it also doesn't cater to a casual audience, in my opinion, is just not understanding what Classic WoW is. The reason WoW, before it was called Classic WoW, the 2004 version, Vanilla WoW, the reason that popped off so much was because of how much it catered to a more casual audience compared to how other MMOs on the market operated and behaved. It was far more approachable for the average player. In fact, the first drop-off, the major drop-off in players in World of Warcraft's history, happened at the beginning in World of Warcraft Cataclysm, the expansion after Wrath of the Lich King, because heroic dungeons were so freaking hard. I remember because that's when I started the game, and I remember how hard those dungeons were because you had to, egads, interrupt an enemy, otherwise they'd full heal the pack you were pulling. And then they also just kept changing classes, and some people dropped off because of that. And then the big downward spiral WoW had for the longest time wasn't because it focused on casuals or hardcore or whatever, it was because the design of the game was fundamentally crap. Warlords of Draenor was barren, filled with broken promises, barren patches. Like, what even was the 0.1 patch in Warlords of Draenor? All we got was like a selfie camera. Garrisons which murdered the world. You had Legion which was fine, but a lot of people look back on Legion with rose-tinted glasses. Legendaries were a massive controversy back then, on top of like having to grind artifact power. BFA was terrible across the board for both the casual market and also the hardcore market because who wanted to grind islands all the time? And Azerite power was an even less appealing system than artifact power. Do I even need to talk about Shadowlands? Who the hell enjoyed that expansion? WoW's problems weren't because it was hyper-focusing on casuals or hardcore market, it was that the game in its fundamental design was bad. It wasn't fun or engaging, it was overly grindy, with way too many chores and activities it expected everyone to do, either day after day or week after week, that no one wanted to do. And then when we got to Dragonflight and they realized designing a game like that with modular systems that would be abandoned after each expansion was stupid, then we got Dragonflight, and yeah, like narratively that place was like a Disney Wonderland. However, mechanically, it laid the foundation for what we have with World of Warcraft today, which for a lot of people that still actually play the game admit, WoW's in like arguably one of its better states that it's been in like over a decade, if not more. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but in my opinion, to try to blame either casuals or hardcore players for the decline World of Warcraft had after Wrath of the Lich King is just not based in reality. It was an over-reliance in trying to reinvent the wheel with each expansion and throwing away every system that had potential but was underdeveloped at first, and just throwing that away alongside bad philosophical design principles that just continued to spiral out of control until they eventually course-corrected. And then WoW's MO became just give the player as much value as humanly possible. Up the rate of development, have multiple versions of World of Warcraft. If you like Classic, good news, we have multiple versions of that. Do you like retail? Well, good news, we're still going to support that and do a bunch of cool events, like Legion Remix. When it concerns Final Fantasy XIV, I also don't believe it was a focus on casuals, or a focus on hardcore. It was just the opposite problem of World of Warcraft. Whereas World of Warcraft felt the need to reinvent the wheel every expansion, Final Fantasy XIV stuck to its guns, and played it far too safe way too often, and also became way too formulaic as well. Just like look at the state of dungeons. Final Fantasy XIV found something that worked in Shadowbringers and Endwalker and thought, well, people already like this, why would we change the wheel if people are liking this and we're growing because of it? But the problem is, that formula becomes stale after a while, and if you're not going to iterate or innovate on that core concept, it will get boring and stale after a while. Final Fantasy XIV also had another core philosophical issue that Yoshi P even talked about before Dawntrail, at least when it concerned fight design, and that is their desire not to upset anyone. If you wonder how job design, if you wonder how dungeon design, if you wonder how a lot of the current design got here to begin with, it was because they didn't want to particularly upset anyone. And when you had classes or jobs that operated outside of the norm, people complained about them. So in an effort to, like, appease those people, Final Fantasy XIV reined them in. And that's how we got to the 2-minute meta that we have now, because when you had a bunch of jobs that did operate in the 2-minute meta, they synergized with each other. So if you were a job that didn't, you were the odd duck out. And with the way that Final Fantasy XIV and most MMOs operate, if you don't synergize with your other players in an MMO, the pain is especially excruciating. When it concerns Final Fantasy XIV's dungeons, if they try to make a shorter dungeon, people could perceive it to be less content. And you know how the internet can be when an MMO puts out less content, or at least what is perceived to be less content. Or when they put out a really long dungeon and the rewards are the freaking same as a shorter dungeon, MMO players, being as efficiency focused as we are, would elect to just do the content where you get the rewards at a faster clip. Not everyone operates like that, but people on the whole do. I think this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to critiquing MMOs in the modern day. People want to divide each other and cordon off sections of the player base into their own sections and villainize them and argue that they're the reason the game is in the current state, when really at the end of it all, it's just poor design and philosophy. I mean, heck, I remember the World of Warcraft Shadowlands announcement. A lot of people, myself included, pointed out a lot of the issues that expansion would have within the first 5 minutes of them announcing it. And they didn't change anything. There was a whole meme about pull the ripcord, and they didn't. It's not a matter of these games focusing on a casual market or a hardcore market. More often than not, these companies and these groups of people just get stuck in their ways and are too afraid of taking massive risks because, well, MMOs are extremely expensive to not only develop but upkeep. There's a reason MMORPGs are notorious for actually developing and why they take so long. So if you have a working formula or something that you believe can work, you either try to recapture the magic like World of Warcraft tried with Legion for the longest time, or you just continue what was working like Final Fantasy XIV tried to. And that's only the gameplay. I can go on about story and tone-wise till the cows come home, right? Like, I could make an entire video, heck, probably a series of videos knowing how much I can yap, about the aesthetic decline World of Warcraft had for the longest time. It's like, I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since Stormblood, and I started playing World of Warcraft in Cataclysm at the very beginning of it. These are two of my favorite games of all time. Believe me, if you haven't been able to guess, I can go off in a while about these games.
Things would have been far worse.
Now let's move on to story. We have Tamari001 who says, I'm not sure how quote-unquote hot this is, but I hope Meracidia is just a zone or two at best in 8.0, if it's there at all. Much like Thavnir. I read lots of hopes that Meracidia is the expansion for 8.0, but for me, I think it would stall the story. There's only X amount of development time available that don't cost, and making Meracidia a 6-zone expansion will sacrifice something down the road, much as Shadowbringers killed a Golemald expansion. I'd rather do reflection hopping than yet another Dragon Quest. Condensed version, I hope 8.0 is not a full Meracidia expansion because it will stall the story and take development resources away from future content, I like to say. Well, good news. In an interview we covered with Yoshi P not too long ago, he kinda just said that Meracidia is not for a long while. I don't think we see it until like 10.0, unless his definition of like long while or whatever wording he had was just until like 9.0. I think my previous prediction on the narrative is kind of bang on at this point, that this new narrative arc is going to conclude, or at least some part of that conclusion will take place in Meracidia, like how in Endwalker we went to Golemald. Whether or not Meracidia will be all of 10.0, or just like a couple of the zones, or just one of the zones, who knows? But I kind of think that's going to be the pacing of it. I will not be surprised at all if we go shard hopping next. I keep seeing takes that apparently Yoshi P said we're going to Hingashi in 8.0. I cannot find a source for that at all. And like, I've looked, so I could just be someone that's getting gaslit on the internet, so you know, like nothing new. But if we do end up going to Hingashi, I think that would be really cool. It's one of the places I wanted to see more of back in Stormblood. I think for me, I personally just want, at this point, the story to be good. I would like to see a return to like high fantasy. And if you want to know what I specifically mean by that, I talked about it before, but also just look at the new Alliance raid, because like that, I thought that was really dang cool. I know that's just FF11, but I still really liked how it looked. Though if it does go more sci-fi, I don't necessarily mind that either. I'm interested to find out what happens next in the narrative. I'm interested just to find out where the hell we go. And honestly, at this point, I just want to be interested in a new suite of glamour sets again, because it's been kind of a while since the glamour in this game has particularly blown me away, since like tier 2 of Labyrinthos. So yeah, I would particularly like that. Whether I get really cool sci-fi mech suits or really nice suits of armor, I just kind of want to get one or the other at this point. But yeah, I do hope that when we go to Meracidia, they give it the love and care that it deserves. I'm not particularly upset by what they did with Golemold. In fact, I really like the story we had with Golemold in Endwalker. It's just zone design-wise, I wish there was more there than just it being basically a giant square where half of it was a ruined city. I like the grandeur, I like having really big, bold visuals in zone design as well. Also, this is highly subjective, but my god, I just wish we had a bit of snow. Like, in a zone that doesn't look like Golemold, please. That's all I really want. Look, I'm a simple guy.
Things would have been far worse.
Leave a comment down below with your own hot take about Final Fantasy XIV, past, present, or future. I don't want just some typical hot take like, ooh, I like Wooklamont, ooh, I like Wooklamont, ooh, I like Dawntrail, ooh, I don't like Dawntrail. I want your hottest, spiciest take, the one that makes you think the whole world will stand against you. Or if you have some interesting reasoning for one of the other ones that just like kinda badmouthed, feel free to go ahead. And if you want to stay tuned for when we react to them, and also for future Final Fantasy XIV news and coverage and thoughts, you should leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter, Jmulls G. I have a Discord in the description down below. And guys, we have a new relic weapon stage. Huzzah! It's actually not terrible like the other one was. And if you want to hear my thoughts all about it, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet, wait for it again.